building and running a service for the last 3 years is very much about the power of data to transform services. So the way I interpret this is there's massive, and I mean massive, amounts of data becoming available in an accessible, usable and timely way that previously wasn't available. So all sorts of data about what you do is currently being reported to the cloud through your phone and your wearable technology and all sorts of other things, and that simply wasn't the case before. And what that means is that we can build more responsive and efficient and accountable services because we can use that data to inform our services and build them based on that data. And what I mean by that is two things, really. The first thing that usually springs to mind is we can automate existing processes in our services because we can draw on data to make things happen automatically and be confident that they're going okay. And that's the first kind of thing you can do, and you can take some costs out of your business and your service if you do that. But that's not really going to be a revolution. That's going to be a cost-saving exercise. They're not really very revolutionary normally. Because what you can also do because of data is you can completely rethink how you do things from the beginning to the end. So instead of just making forms nicer online or making processes go a bit more quickly or a bit more efficiently, you can completely redesign them. So that's what I think a data-powered revolution is all about. More data becoming available instantly and in a timely way, and using that to build services. So I'm going to give you an example of how we can use data to do something in a totally different way and how we've done that through the programme that I'm responsible for. When I'm talking about this, I'm telling you about it not because of Verify specifically or this particular problem, but because I think this approach could be applied to many, many, many different types of services that we run in our towns and cities and in the country. So, how do you know that I'm actually called Janet Hughes? That's my first question. I just told you that, but how do you know? Have any of you checked any identity stuff about me? Do you care? Probably not, because I'm just some woman standing up and saying things to you. It doesn't really matter. But what if I wanted to borrow 20 quid off you? Maybe you let that go, because you could look me up online. What if I wanted to borrow £10,000 off you? And I came to you and went, look, you've seen me speak, so now I want to borrow £10,000 off you. Because I heard on the internet that you might want to check out who I was then. What if you were a service giving me a driving licence or a passport or the right to live in a property or the right to park in a blue badge space? You wouldn't have been a little bit more confident that I am actually Janet Hughes and I live where I say I do. And normally in services, the way we deal with this problem is we get people to come in and we totally pointlessly look at some identity documents that we're not actually qualified to inspect. And that's okay, because you can only come into an office one person at a time. But if you want to put services online, you can't rely on that kind of shonky thing. You actually need to have some confidence that people are who they say they are, otherwise you can have baddies getting access to services that they shouldn't have access to. So to solve that problem at the national level, but we've done it in a way that could work for local too, we built this thing called gov.uk Verify. Has anyone here tried it?
Yeah. For the
nice.
For the post office, like you've got 3 options on the post office.
He gets a prize and a buy a drink later. The rest of you, have a look, because it exists, it's a real thing. And what this does is, it allows you to prove your identity when you're accessing a government service without having to go down to the job centre or the post office or send things in the post or make a phone call or do any of those things that can only happen in working hours in an inconvenient way and in a way that's frankly a little bit rubbish from a service point of view. So instead of doing that, you can do it all online. We have these 3 phases when we build services in central government now. Live, which is what we are now, means that we've finished the early stages of development. We've been iterating it and improving it rapidly, and we're now ready to start saying phase out the old ways of doing things and start relying on this. So it's very exciting. That happened just a few weeks ago. And here's how it works, right? You come to use a service like checking your driving licence information or filing your tax return or claiming universal credit, and it says, right, hang on, we need to know who you are. Could you prove your identity, please, through gov.uk Verify? And when you do that, you choose a certified company. So the government isn't doing this itself. I've got contracts with 8 companies who can verify your identity completely online. And what they have to find out is the identity that you're asserting real? Is there such a person as Janet Hughes at all? None of you, few of you. A couple of you might know that. I've known for a while. But you don't actually know. You haven't been to my house, have you?
No.
So, you can't be sure. Don't believe him. Is the identity real? Meaning my name, address and date of birth, they really exist. But that's not enough, because I could have just nicked Andrew's bag and been pretending to be him. So we also need to know, do I own the identity? Is it actually me? Am I that person? And you definitely don't know that. And then you need to know, is it still me next time I sign in each time? And that's what these companies have to do. Why is this relevant to data? Because I'm going to tell you how they do that using data that they could not have done even a couple of years ago. And the way they do this is giving us a much higher level of confidence that the person really is who they say they are when they transact online, than you would get face-to-face in most services, and certainly that's been available online. So how do they do that? This is the certified company, and what they do is they use a whole range of different sources of data that they can access instantaneously, and what they do is check information that I've provided as a user. So I will say, here's my driving license information, and they can check immediately to see whether that matches a valid record. They can do the same with passports, they can do the same with credit reference agency data, and since we have been in our beta and development stage, they've added a whole load of new ways to do that. So they can check your mobile phone contract if you give your consent. So you can say, I've got a contract with the EE, this is where I live, and the mobile phone company will immediately confirm or deny that that exists. And they look at an increasing range, to get a range of different types of evidence from these data sources that your identity exists and it belongs to you, and then they can achieve this high level of confidence. And all of this happens immediately, instantly, in real time online. At the moment, there's maybe 10, broadly speaking, different sorts of data that they can access. But all the time we're seeing new data coming to the market because organisations are realising, as Mike was describing, the power and value of the data that they're sitting on. So mobile network operators have very recently started providing this service. Charitable giving organisations like Just Giving are now going to do it. They've got 7 million active accounts, and they can verify that you've got a bank account and it's really you. And over time, we're expecting to see lots more of these data sources develop. So what that means is, if we as government had tried to build our own identity service, what we would have done is we would have gone, right, well, what have we got? Passports and driver licences, and maybe we might know that we've seen some at the job centre, and we've built something around that, and that's it, done. What happens if the passport database gets compromised? What happens if someone hasn't got a passport or a driving licence? What are we going to do for them? And actually, those databases aren't very timely. I last updated my passport about 8 years ago, so that's not actually a particularly reliable source of evidence on its own. Because we're using this data-driven approach and the market-based approach, there's 50 different types of evidence you can choose from as a user to prove your identity. So if you don't have a driving licence, you can use your mobile. Different ways for you to go through the process of proving your identity. And you can do that straightforwardly. And the reason you want that is because there's millions of people in this country, all of whom have a different range of types of evidence that they are who they say they are. Not everybody's got a driving licence, not everybody's got a passport, not everyone's got a mobile phone actually. So 80,000 different ways to get through, and that is an incredibly diverse and resilient way of approaching this problem, which we simply never would have got to had we tried to solve it ourselves. And what that means is people can now have access to simple and safe access to really valuable services online. So instead of just going online and filling in a form, which is what we often think about when we talk about transforming services, people can actually have access to their data and change it. People can actually have access to automated processes. It means we can take huge cost and inconvenience out of government services. There's already this many services using it, so if you haven't used Verify, all of you except for this gentleman here, thank you.
I did it for the tax return.
Right, so if you want to file your self-assessment tax return, you can use Verify. If you want to use any of those other services on the list, you can also use it. View your driving licence, claim universal credit. So by doing this, taking this data-driven approach, we're building a market. Why are we doing that? Because we think it will give us, everybody is going to have identity accounts eventually. We're thinking about this in a completely different way, as I said at the beginning. So rather than thinking, right, government needs to solve this problem, what have we got, let's try and solve it, let's automate our existing processes, we're coming at this from a completely different angle. We think that pretty soon, as in a small number of years, everyone will have identity accounts, just like they have email accounts, bank accounts, and other types of accounts. So bank accounts and credit card accounts to make payments, email accounts to send messages, identity accounts as a repository of trust to access a whole range of services online. So once you've proven your identity once, then you can use that account to access a whole range of services, not just for central government, but for local government, the health sector, and even the private sector. That's going to take out enormous cost. It's going to give us much more diversity than we would have got if government built its own solution. It's going to give us innovation, because those companies are innovating and trying to get this done more efficiently all the time. And it's much more resilient than if we built our own thing just using our own data. So we built our own thing just using our own data. We probably would have broken and got hacked, or it would have been extremely expensive to protect it. But instead, we've got 8 different companies, and if one of them fails, that's only one of them, and the rest of it can actually carry on. So it's a completely different, I'm not going to go into these ones in detail to save time, but it's a completely different way of looking at this particular problem. And by doing that, we can reduce the cost of identity assurance in the market by 90%, not to 90%, but by 90%. We can take £3 billion out of the cost of identity assurance in the UK. And that's all because we're taking this data-driven, market-based approach. Just want to finish by talking a bit about rules and standards here, because I've talked a lot about what the technology enables us to do, but I could not agree more with what you said about the fact that it's very rarely actually a technology problem. Almost all of my time as program director for Verify is taken up dealing with people problems and turfiness and difficulties to do with relationships and trust and those sorts of things within government. It's not really about the technology at all. That's actually pretty straightforward. So I wouldn't get carried away thinking, yay, here's some technology, let's apply it. But much more important than that is establishing what the rules are, what the standards are. It's really easy to understand the power of data. If you just read a few things online and listen to a few people talking, that's fine. We need to establish the rules of the road. We need users to trust our services. People really freak out when you start talking to them about accessing their data and using it. And it makes people very uncomfortable. And we need to make sure we don't mess that up. Because if we do, collectively, mess it up, we'll lose our chance. And it'll be another generation before data-driven services can happen again. And we need to protect people's privacy when we're doing this. Even if people don't understand what's happening with their data, we need to take responsibility for managing it in a responsible way that protects their privacy and keeps it secure. And we can't. Who here has got a Facebook account? Raise your hands. Who here has in full read the terms and conditions of Facebook? Very few, very small percentage. And you can't expect people to do that. So this is a new era of, you can't just say, well, be transparent about it and that's okay. You've got to really take responsibility for setting the rules and sticking to them about how we deal with this data. So this is where we in our team publish standards for identity assurance and how that should happen. And we make sure that our certified companies are independently accredited as meeting those standards. And that's very important and fundamental to the trust relationship. We've also, and I really urge you to look these up on gov.uk, we've established a privacy and consumer advisory group. And it consists of experts and campaign groups in privacy. And they advise us. Every month I meet them and show them what we're doing fully. It's fully open book procedure. It's people like No to ID, Big Brother Watch, Information Commissioner's Office, various universities. They've developed for us these principles as to how we should deal with identity assurance. But they would apply just as much to any other situation in which we're dealing with people's data. And it's all about putting people in control of what happens with their data, giving them choices, making it transparent to people, allowing them to opt out if it's something that they ought to be able to opt out of, and completely erase the fact that they chose something previously. And this is really going to be important as the data-driven revolution takes off, to make sure people can feel confident and trust what we're doing. And this is actually something that takes up a huge amount of my time making sure that we do that. More broadly in government, you may have seen this, you may not, there's been some consultation work looking at what can the data ethics be? What are the rules if we're talking about sharing data between departments, or if we're talking about building new services in this way? We all need to think about this, though, not in central government, but in local government as well, to make sure that we don't breach that trust and confidence. If you want to know some more information about Verify in particular, here is some links that you can follow, or just look me up on Twitter. We always like answering questions, so please let me know. In particular, we've just said we're going to do some pilots with local authorities. So if you're interested, if you're from a local authority and want to understand a little bit how you could use what we've built to help transform your services, then get in touch, because there's an opportunity there to take part. Thank you.